if you didn't have resistance.
Yes.
Which is really weird.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because if the ego was wise and had like foresight, it could see the future. Go, oh, if we just give in and relax and relinquish control, then we're going to come up with better stuff, and our life's going to be better. Be able to buy a nicer house.
Yeah.
You know, maybe be able to go on trips. Your work will do well. Everything will be good.
It's a deep subject.
Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 394. Hope you're amazing as always and life is treating you beautiful. I think it's true. I just looked at the date. We're on the 28th of November. This is going to be the last one in November, which means that we've got another 4 episodes and we're in 2023. I don't know what the was about, but hey, it sounded all right. It's crazy, right? And it was interesting this morning, someone was talking about, oh no, we've only 2023, I'm worried about this. And, you know, I really had to sit down, and you've heard me say this probably 100 times if you are a regular listener of Mindset by Design. And if you're not, come on, all you got to do is hit that subscribe button. Pretty easy. But what I was saying is, for a start, there's 2 things. One, imagine, right, rewinding 20 years. Maybe you're 20 years old listening to this, so it might be a bit early, but if you rewound it 20 years for everybody else, where were you? What were you doing? What was your vision of the future for yourself? Are you accomplishing any of those goals? Are you living a life very similar to what you planned 20 years ago, or what you dreamt about, or you hoped that was you could accomplish? I bet a lot of you are nodding your heads right now going, yeah, pretty similar. I'm in a bit more stress and a bit more debt. What the hey? That's life. That's why you'll listen to this podcast, so we can truly get you to that next level. And the other thing I said to this to a client of mine, runs a big Amazon business, you know, like $8 million business. But hey, at the start of the year, it wasn't like that, but it is now. So think about what I can help you with. But I said to them, the truth is, you should love this time of year, Christmas. You should love New Year. And they were like, why? And I was saying, well, it gives you an opportunity to reflect. It gives you an opportunity to put like lines in the sand. This was then, this is now. Who am I being now? There's a big difference, right? And when you get this good like flow state, feeling confident, happy, taking action, right? All of those things, then that is the new you now. Does that make sense? And if you can literally make that line in the sand, don't have to be in sand. Hey, I'm in Mexico. That sounds pretty awesome, but you know what I mean? Make that definitive decision so you can see that's something called a contrast frame, right? The mind muscle, or the neurology of who you were, and the neurology of who you are. Because the more we can interrupt that pattern and guide ourselves to be aware of who we are now, then it means that muscle, or the neural nets, will start connecting, start building, and start forming a new habit. That habit then becomes your behaviors. Does that make sense? So by literally doing something so simple about showing that contrast frame, what you're able to do is start literally living a different life. That's it. So the more you become aware of what's automatically playing in your unconscious mind, the more we can change it, tune it, and do lots of different cool stuff with it. Plain and simple. But for you right now, that's the biggest thing I want you to start practicing. So as we start moving into 2023, it can either be scary, it can be overwhelming, or it can be awesome, or it could be the best year of your entire life ever. Does that make sense? But that's up to you. That's a choice. And that choice is what creates momentum. Because it builds an energy inside. It builds something inside of you that lights you up. Because what's the old classic cheese bowl saying? But it's pretty cool. If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there, right? So if you hope for $250,000 this in 2023, but you don't have that game plan, then what the fuck are you doing, right? Oh, I hope I get more sales. I hope I can close more deals. Well, hope ain't gonna do it. Hope ain't gonna do it. What's gonna do it is strategic thinking, high-level decisions, and your ability to control your nervous system and brain under the most amount of pressure. So if you're working for someone else right now doing sales or working inside of their company, how can you exponentially increase your income? Well, I don't know, Andy. Well, that's because you haven't thought about it, right? You haven't thought about it like a machine. What's the start? What's the finish? What are the programs that go in the middle or the steps that's going to achieve the outcome? And yeah, it's not all logical. It's a lot of emotional and using systems, because if you don't know how to step into a state, if you don't know how to create very specific routines that allow you to for peak performance, you're not going to be able to. If you are being triggered by resistance, or you keep feeling yourself in patterns of behavior that driving you crazy, then guess what? We need to change them. Guess what? If you're at the same place or very similar as you were last year, then what the fuck are you doing? Do you know what I mean? All of these are unconscious behaviors that we have to change. And the crazy thing is, the people who are at the very highest level or are driving forwards, people part of my Unfair Advantage Academy, private clients, people who do immersion days and weekends with me, whatever it is, it's a case of those are the people that get results because they're constantly working and investing in themselves. But most people don't. And then that's why a habit becomes the 21-day habit lie. And if you haven't heard that, if you haven't heard that episode or me talk about that in any of my presentations, then all right, I probably need to bring it up again. But yeah, 21 days is definitely not the number to create a new habit. It's not 90 days either, just to give you a little insight. The science definitely shows none of that to be true. So speaking of today's episode, what do you want? Well, we want to be able to break procrastination. Right. So that's why I want to share this clip today. It's on Joe Rogan. His name's Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. If you've never read those books and many others of his, they're badass books. They're badass books. I should have an affiliate link here because they're so good. But really what it's about is understanding yourself, right? And that procrastination. And you might go, Andy, I haven't got procrastination. I'm just stressed out, or the leads aren't coming in, or this isn't happening, right? Or I'm not being able to close deals, right? But the truth is, no, it's you. It's you. Hard fact. It's you. Plain and simple. Because if you're I'm not procrastinating, I'm not closing deals. Well, you're procrastinating about developing or investing in yourself or a specific routine that triggers the response that you want chemically, biochemically, logically, emotionally, left and right hemispheres, flow states, gamma waves, all of this stuff, right? If you're not triggering those responses to create a predetermined outcome and the badass version of you, then guess what happens? Yeah, you're procrastinating. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Trust me, you are. Because that extra little bit of understanding and knowledge is why what I'm basically bringing over is this. It's sports and peak performance to the sales and entrepreneur world. Not many people are doing it because they don't really understand it. So that's what I'm working on. That's what the Unfair Advantage Academy is. It's to teach you how to use sports and peak performance for sales and entrepreneurs so you can earn millions of dollars and have a long-lasting career. And the truth is, that's why I wanted this episode, because Stephen talks about it in two different ways, and I have an opinion on both of these ways that he explains in this clip. He talks about ego and also the brain's response, and I'm going to communicate and show you how they are linked. And he doesn't quite understand that, but I'm going to show you. And also what Seth Godin said. I'm going to show you about those things too in here, right? Helping you out, breaking it down, you know what I mean? And that's it. that's what this episode's about. So I want you to give you a much deeper understanding around procrastination. And really, I don't believe in procrastination. And you're like, Andy, shut up. I get it. I'm not going to shut up. But I'm also going to say I don't believe in it. And I've done a couple of episodes about that in the past. So procrastination is a lie, I think, is one of the episodes. We're up to 400 episodes nearly. You got to go back and listen to a few of them. But it's, check that one out. I think it's procrastination is a lie. I really believe in alignment, not procrastination. And I'm not going to explain that right now. You can come into a Facebook group. You can just come to the Facebook group. 7-figure sales performance. Right? Not 7-figure sales, 7-figure sales performance. Because once you know how to do sales, then it's about, like an athlete, building that ability to create performance whenever you choose. Does that make sense? Good. Going on a little rant? Yeah, I am. But it's okay. It's okay. We'll jump into the episode right now, but make sure that you're grabbing your Jedi Mind Hack, and then you get access to what? Yes, you get access to $1,000. Well, it's $997, but it's selling it as, but $997 value course for free, all about high-level performance, neuroscience, the NLP side, and neurovisual conditioning, which is my stuff. So, unfairadvantage.online. Do you want me to say it again? I'll say it again. Unfairadvantage.online. One more time. Unfairadvantage.online. So go there now, and then let's jump into this episode. Know you're going to love it, and I will see you at the end of the show.
Not only is it universal and that everybody experiences it, but they all seem to experience it with the same script. You know, you're not worthy, you're too old, too young, too fat, too thin, whatever. Or let's do something else. Let's distract ourselves with something else. So everybody gets the same thing. I mean, I always say that it's a force of nature. You know, it's not personal. It's not specific to you, even though that voice in your head sounds like it is specific to you. It's saying Joe, and then it's hitting you right in the points that are your sore points, you know?
Yeah.
But it's really not personal. Everybody seems to experience the same thing. And
what do you think it is? When did you write The War of Art?
2002.
And in that time, after writing that, I'm sure it's obviously been a very successful book. So you've had time to think about this. Like, what do you think is going on? Like, why is that a force of nature? What is it?
I'll give, this is my lengthy explanation, but
Okay.
I'll give you my theory.
Please.
So, crew, let me just jump in there. He's about to explain two different theories, right? He talks about the ego, and he talks about Seth Godin's concept of the amygdala. Now, you probably know both of these concepts, right? I've taught them 1,000 times on the podcast. Maybe not 1,000. They're only up to 394 episodes. But you get what I'm saying. So, 100 times. There you go. And also, I teach this with clients, presentations. I teach this on retreats. I teach this in so many different places. I teach both concepts. And I'm going to show you how they link together. But I just want you to ask yourself which one sounds right for you. And then, I'll jump back in.
If we think of the human, so everybody's got to bear with me, this takes a minute or two. If you think of the human psyche, we got the ego, which is like a little black dot in the middle of a greater thing that we would call the self, like the Jungian self with a capital S. And the self contains the collective unconscious, all the aspects of the unconscious, right? The hero's journey, the archetypes of the unconscious, all of the sort of intuitive stuff, right? When you, I would imagine, come up with great comedy material or any kind of material, it's coming from that self, coming from that deeper place, right? And even when Jung or Joseph Campbell describe the self, I have a little diagram in the War of Art where adjacent to this larger self, they'd have like 3 arrows, and the arrows are coming from what they call the divine ground, which I take to mean whatever greater force is out there, that will come to you. So this is a long way of saying that the ego, which is, right, your I part, the part that identifies with this body and with the ego, wants to be in control, right? The ego is where you drive down to the store, you get it, whatever it is, right? But when you're trying to tap into that greater intelligence, like if you're writing, if you're trying to come up to, if you're a musician, if you're any kind of creative person, you're trying to surrender to that self, to that greater self. And I feel like the ego hates that. The ego knows if you make that shift to identify with that greater self, then the ego is out of business. So I think, this is my theory, that the ego produces resistance to try to stop you from connecting and trusting and believing, because it is a leap of faith, right, to get to that other level, wherever it is. So the ego says to you, who do you think you are to try to tap into that thing? Who do you think you are to come up with this idea? It's been done 1,000,000 times better than you'll ever do it. You don't have the chops to do this. You're going to fall on your ass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or let me distract you. Why don't we chase some women? Why don't we get drunk? Why don't we hang out with our buddies? Whatever it is. But so I think that what the ego wants is to maintain its control, right? And if you make that shift into that greater self, that's when you really are starting to tap into great stuff. That's where the great stuff comes from.
Yeah.
Right? And that puts the ego out of a job. At least this is my theory, Joe. So I think that the ego produces it. I mean, it's interesting, sort of, animals don't experience resistance. I'm sure they don't, right?
Right, but they also
Because
don't really experience creativity.
True. But they're in that greater world, I think, naturally,
Right.
They're
free.
They're in that God energy, An eagle or somebody that's flying, you watch like the tiniest little wings or feathers even, control it. They're not thinking about anything, right? When they're hunting or whatever it is. So anyway, that's my theory on what resistance is. Now, Seth Godin, he is. He's a believer that it's the
Who is Seth Godin? I do not know.
Seth Godin is a kind of a marketing guru, one of the earliest guys on the internet from way back when it first began, and is a great teacher of marketing and stuff like that, and also a wonderful guy There he is, in the sense that he is highly ethical dude. Like when he talks about businesses, startups, and all the things that he's kind of helping people with, ethics is a huge part of it. So I really respect the guy. And he's a great deep thinker, too. Now, he thinks it's what he calls the lizard brain, the amygdala, which I'm not even sure what that is. I guess it's the reptile brain at the back of your head, that's what's producing something. It wants producing resistance. But anyway, I respect his thinking on that, but I think it's what I just explained to you.
Okay. So did you have a little think? Did you have a little think about which one is apparent to you? And if you're a regular listener, and I hope to God not by you are right now, if that even those words that I said make sense, but I hope you are, because you'll heard me explain this both ways many times, and both ways are correct in my opinion. You know what I mean? Because what he's talking about is the ego, and the reason I explain the ego this way is it is a part of us. Now, this is different from psychology. Psychology teaches us to have a healthy ego. What Stephen's coming from is the more universal or spiritual aspect of understanding that ego is the earthbound side of us that keeps us, or wants to keep us safe. It does that by projecting or limiting ourselves, right? So projecting into the world that we are somebody better than or different to who we are. Shiny, shiny, bling, bling, I'm awesome, all of that shit, right? But then the other side is it can limit us. And I call this boundary conditioning. It keeps us in a boundary, right? And it does that for the same reason it wants to keep us safe. So the projection side of the ego wants to keep us safe by projecting us as a leader into the world. The other one wants to keep us safe in the known, right? What it knows by continuing it's the same the inside of the box thinking, let's call it that, right? So that's what the ego is, right? It's a protective mechanism. It's part of us that wants to keep us safe. Now, it can strive us forwards. We can use it in performance. I don't use it in performance, but you can use it in performance. Meaning in martial arts, let's use that as an example. As you know, that's my love. It's a case of ego is the thing that will go that 10 steps further to push and get a result, or tap that person out, or take that pain and punishment and that shot so you can continue fighting. The ego is going to keep you pushing. But why is that? Again, it's a safety mechanism, right? So that's one concept. Remember what I said, a safety mechanism. Now, what he's talking about is neuroscience. That is what Steph Godin's talking about, and he's absolutely correct. What he's talking about is an amygdala, which is your fight-flight response, right? So what is that? That's a protective mechanism, right? So when we step into the unknown, the amygdala alarm goes off, and it asks that question. Are you safe? This is the way I teach it, right? So are you safe? Well, that's a part of our brain that's a defensive mechanism that's keeping us safe. Now, from that, then the ego can push us forwards or hold us back, just like what I've talked about, right? And that is because that's what that does. So both of them are kind of the same thing, or the ego uses the amygdala response as an alarm system to know what to do. So it goes, are we safe? Are we safe? Are we safe? That's the amygdala. Are we safe? Are we safe? The ego goes, yeah, we're safe, moves forwards, or it goes, we're not safe, and moves back. Does that make sense? So I wish I could talk to Joe Rogan about that. You know what I mean? I wish I could speak to Stephen Pressfield about that. Maybe I should email him, to be honest. Yeah, I should send him a little message. Let me do that. But hopefully that makes sense. Good. Beautiful. Let me jump back in.
What you're saying makes a lot of sense. And the ego, whatever that thing is, that it's so interesting how it's not able to see that it would actually benefit the ego if you didn't have resistance.
Yes.
Which is really weird.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because if the ego was wise and had foresight, it could see the future. Go, if we just give in and relax and relinquish control, then we're going to come up with better stuff, and our life's going to be better. Be able to buy a nicer house.
Yeah.
Maybe be able to go on trips. Your work will do well. Everything will be good.
It's a deep subject, because also if you think about the ego's view of what life is, I'm going to go into some deep stuff for you to mind this stuff,
have to
right?
clarify. Just
the
feel
ego
free.
has a whole view. The ego believes that this material world is all there is, right?
Yeah.
The ego believes in death. The ego believes that when this body dies, we die, right? The ego believes that this flesh can be hurt, can be maimed, can be broken, et cetera, et cetera. So the ego naturally lives in fear. I think that the predominant emotion of the ego, if we're living in the ego, which is 99% of people do, our predominant emotion is fear, right? And fear, even though we might not know it, fear of death, which is kind of why people want to achieve, I think, right? Let me make a name for myself, blah, blah, blah. Why people want to have children, the children will live on, why they have insurance, why they try to succeed and have a big house and this and that and the other thing, right? That's all sort of coming out of a mindset of fear. Whereas this giant self, in my opinion, the bigger self that is connected to the thing, its predominant emotion is love, if you ask me. Now, the ego, another thing the ego believes is that I am separate from you, right? We are all separate individuals, right? I could hurt you and it won't hurt me. That's what the ego thinks, right? That's why so much of the evil that happens in the world comes out of that, right? We can torture these sons of bitches and it won't happen to us, right? Nothing bad will happen to us. But the self believes exactly the opposite. Once you get into that deep level, right, that we are not separate from one another, that you and I are bound together in some kind of way along with all of humanity and all of the animal life and all of the planet, all of the oceans and all of that. And so the predominant emotion in that self is the emotion of love. So the ego, this is my belief anyway, the ego being centered in fear is going to try to hang on to what it's got, right? If the ego thinks that it's living our life, it's calling the shots, it's going to hang on to that, out of fear, and won't. That's why I think it's so strong. Resistance is so strong. When the closer you get to moving into that self, into that greater space, like if you're sitting down and trying to write a novel, and you get into a kind of a flow of it, that's what the ego is really afraid of, because it's such a kind of empowering and intoxicating experience. The ego says to itself, shit, if this guy stays over here very long, he's never going to go back to, to where I call the shots. So I think that's why it makes itself, it puts such an intense shot at you to stop you from getting there.
So there you go. Stephen was explaining his way of what I was just explaining, right? So the ego is he's going deep down the rabbit hole of spirituality here. I love this. He's talking about performance and stuff with the war of art and things, but yeah, he's talking about spirituality, which I really feel is the missing part of the business world. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's wild, because every entrepreneur I know, well, not every, lots of modern day entrepreneurs are actually really connected with themselves, but they don't teach that in business. They don't show that in business. It's like old school sales and old school business, which was all ego. It's all rah 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 rah, Wolf of Wall Street bullshit, right? Or old school business, like I can't even think. Let's go Wolf of Wall Street again, or let's use, I don't know. You know what I mean? And it's just so outdated to the way people are or are becoming these days. People are more in touch with themselves. People understand that there is some weird, freaky frequency that is around us, and our thoughts do create things, and we can let go of emotions and really change our life, and we can build patterns of behavior, and our brain or the software in it or the neurology is malleable and changeable. You know what I mean? It's like the world's advanced. So what he's talking about is that next level of awareness over how to play this game called life, man. Because truthfully, there's so many subtle things that need to be played with to create success. It's not just about being bullheaded and egotistical and driving forwards. It's not just about logic, right? And just putting a machine in front of you that works. There's an energy that comes into a sale. There's an energy that comes into a business. There's an energy when you're talking to other people. You can feel them, man. And that, our science hasn't caught up with what that really is. But we all know it's real. We all know it's true, right? You can feel if someone's a douchebag. You can feel if someone's lying, right? You can feel if you're around someone in general, if you're safe or not, or they're a loose cannon, right? You can generally feel this stuff. And it's the same with rapport building. And some people go, you shouldn't build rapport. It doesn't matter. Well, I have a very different opinion. It just means that you're doing it very wrong. And I can go into a whole conversation about that. I commented on someone else's post, and they agreed with me. And yeah, they're a high level expert. So it's the case of when we understand these things, then we can change.
So this greater self, what do you think that is? If the greater self is all about love, And the greater self is what recognizes the connection between all of us. What is the greater self?
Okay, it's a great question. I know that you're a guy that's into psychedelics to a certain extent, right? I mean, now my only experience with psychedelics is back in the 60s, So I haven't done any of the stuff that people are doing now.
You want some?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm too old for that.
You're not too old.
But one of the things that
You have resistance. That's resistance to psychedelics.
Maybe so. But one of the things that you know from LSD or from mescaline or anything like that, right, is you suddenly see a whole other world that was not there before, right? Even though you're looking at that wall, all of a sudden that wall becomes so beautiful, right, that you can't even say anything except wow, right? So that's, I believe, I was thinking in those moments, this must be the way Jesus sees the world, or the Dalai Lama sees the world, or God sees the world. And when I come back to my regular self and I see this kind of normal shrunk down world, that's not the real world, right? There's another world that's greater. And so that's sort of my feeling about it, Joe, that when you enter that, there is a greater world. We're living in that greater world right now. We just can't see it, we just see what's in front of us. And I think another aspect of it, to me, you would know a lot more about this than I do, being more in the present of this, is that if you're living in that kind of psychedelic world, you really can't drive a car. You really can't operate heavy equipment. You really can't handle the stuff you have to handle. You can't do your taxes, right? So in order to kind of live, you do have to sort of shrink that world down, right? To push all the beauty aside and all the amazing shit aside.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop the fact that stuff is there, right? I always wonder, what was it like before we were born, and what's it going to be like after we die? Are we going to live in that world? Are we going to enter that world again? And what is that? What will that be like?
Stephen keeps going. I like Stephen even more. You know what I mean? I listened to this clip and I selected it, but then I'm going over it again, right, with you. And if you're familiar with plant medicine, psilocybin, and that type of work, people call it an ego death. Now, I don't believe your ego dies, not while we're here on Earth, otherwise we'd probably transcend away from Earth. But while we're here on Earth, the ego is having part of our human experience. It's like our arm, like our leg, right? So we can detach from it. Detachment, I believe, is not death, because your ego comes back. As someone who's going on about constantly about they've had an ego death, and you should, and all the rest of it, and ask them, just say to them, no, you didn't. To give it, yeah, I did. No, you didn't. See with their response. Right, they have an egotistical response in general, right? Or they'll come back with something, but it's coming from ego. And the truth is, but what he's saying is, I love, when you're in that world, it's like you are very heart-centered, connected with everything and everyone. But what you're not connected with is, in general, man-made construction. So I don't mean like something made out of wood that looks beautiful. I mean, like if we went on psychedelics and you went to New York and started walking around New York. Yeah, that's not going to go down too well. You know what I mean? You're not going to get a shamanic growth experience, are you? Well, maybe you would, but I very much doubt it. What you're going to get is looking at all the horrors and the horribleness of what mankind has done to the earth, because it's horrible. Concrete constructions are horrible when you're in that place and you want to be in nature. So what he says is beautiful, right? Because is that a space that we come to when we were born, before we're born, and when we die? Is it a place that we go back to? And what going back to, or going forwards to, or being in the moment to? It depends what you're talking about. But what he's saying there is again, once you come down or you come off psychedelics, your ego then attaches again because it has to. because it has to, for us to deal with the animal part of life, which is survival. It's part of surviving is paying your taxes, paying your bills, making sure you got money for food and rent and a mortgage or whatever it is. That's the ego side, has to become smaller to be able to handle what this world is, or our human experience. So you might be going, Andy, what the fuck does this have to do with sales and making money? Everything. Because the thing that you're being held back by is your ego. If you're procrastinating on that sales call, if you're holding yourself back because you don't want to do training, I've done all the training, I don't know what the Unfair Advantage Academy is. Yeah, I get it, but it means you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And it's the same with performance and in keeping that consistency every day, every call. It's like becoming a method actor who's installed that way of thinking. But the truth is, we can come from ego around that, or we can come from our heart. And you might be going, heart, Andy, what the hell? Yes, your heart brain, your chest brain. If you don't know that, then it means you have definitely not done any of my webinars or gone through anything. But the truth is, when you get that, then you can connect to people a different way. There's many ways to communicate with people. Words are just one. Do you know what I mean? Words are one way to communicate with someone. That's how I get around these Latin countries that I live in. I don't speak much Spanish, but I seem to be able to communicate with most people, even if I get what they're saying wrong sometimes, for sure. But I'm able to communicate and get myself around places, and it's because of there's other ways to communicate. And when you can start understanding that, then you have to ask the question, if there's other ways to communicate, why can't I communicate with myself or the world that I'm around or that client in front of me or my business a different way? Well, you can. And that's how we get you back to being a top performer. That's how we get you back to increasing your closing percentage by 20%. Oh, that's how we change your life forever. And that's my whole mission, man. I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I have no clue. No clue. That's why I make sure these go out every week. Make sure they do. Why? Because, man, I'm only doing my best. And if I can give you everything that I know and everything that I've experienced, and I can put it somewhere that you can listen to it forever and be influenced by that, then I'm not here on earth. And that makes me so happy. Makes me happy because I'm still helping. And that's all I'm here to do. And so are you. And that's why your sale and business should be wrapped around that concept deep inside of you, not getting, but giving. Because if you give to that person and give them what they want, you're going to get it next. And that's the most important thing about business.
Do you think that this narrowed down world that you're talking about when the psychedelics wear off, do you think that's an artifact of the cold, hard reality of being an animal living amongst predators and other violent human beings on Earth, where in order to survive, in order to raise your children and protect your village and provide food to each other, you kind of have to have this very simplistic, just as you said, narrowed down, just this different, where you can't just wax euphorically about the concept of the universe and life and love. And,
I do believe that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's why, again, like what I was saying about the ego being dominated by the emotion of fear, right? And also our parents, right, and our society, our school, everything, for our own good, as we're kids growing up, tells us all that, right? It kind of indoctrinates us into that world. For our own good, right? It wants to protect us, On your way walking to school, somebody's going to beat you up, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, yeah, I do think that's the case. It's kind of a strange world, isn't it, that God created for us? I mean, on the one hand, there's this beautiful other dimensional reality out there, but then there's this hardcore world of predators, in order to, like what did you just have on Instagram today? An alligator taking off the leg off a deer? I mean, that's that.
Did I?
You don't even know if what was there, but it's there. We just saw it a few minutes ago. But
I had it on Instagram?
Yeah, I think so. But
Yeah.
that's the world, right, that God
Yes,
gave us,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
So,
predators and prey and
yeah,
monsters.
Yeah.
I love the explanation at the end, right? And of course, Rogan's got crazy animal chopping up videos. He loves them. He just loves the reality. But the truth is, yeah, we come back, and like I was saying before, it's a case of we go into the survival part of our brain because the world is crazy. But if everybody had that psychedelic experience and was able to detach from our monkey brains and egos, then guess what? We'd have a beautiful, beautiful life. Everybody on Earth. So, crew, that's it. The end of episode 394. We're getting closer and closer to episode 400. And yeah, we're getting closer and closer to 2023. So if you want to get it together, if you want to double that income, if you want to take your whole game to a whole different level, come with me. Come with me. Head over to theunfairadvantage.online. Get your stuff, have a chat with us, and we've got the Unfair Advantage Academy starting at the first week of January, and I guarantee you that, one, the prices are the cheapest they're ever going to be, and secondly, it's going to change your life. So, there we are. Kick ass, much, much love, and I will see you next week. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.